Page 90, Part 7. As already explained, all processes and so forth related to emotions, feelings, to the psyche and the consciousness are cognitively conditioned factors in conscious or unconscious form. Perceptions, thinking, and recognition, factors through which cognition is indeed embodied, do not only come into operation consciously, rather also unconsciously, a fact which is completely unknown by today's psychiatry, or which it does not heed due to delusion and professional arrogance. And since cognitive processing also happens unconsciously, there are therefore also unconscious causal conditions for emotions, thoughts, and feelings, which often also appear subliminally, however, can nonetheless positively or negatively influence the psyche. Especially in subliminal or completely unconscious form, manifold cognitive causal conditions can emerge, which are, above all, to do with the constitution of the particular human organism, as well as its existing living conditions and state of evolution. In regard to this, the following factors in particular are thereby to be named, which along with many other influences play a decisive role in regard to unconscious cognition and therefore in regard to unconscious perception, as well as thinking and recognition, whereby, however, there are still many other effects which likewise have important significance in regard to unconscious cognitive processing. 1. Alcoholism. 2. Desires. 3. Drugs. 4. Abilities. 5. Gender. 6. State of health. 7. Instincts. 8. Fitness of body, psyche, and consciousness. 9. Vices. 10. Medicines. 11. Motivations. 12. Satiation. 13. Sexuality. 14. Destiny. 15. Social influences. 16. Addictions. 17. Wishes. 18. Hopes. 19. Situations. 20. Experiences. 21. Events. And 22. Inabilities, and so on and so forth. The most diverse factors are to be borne in mind with this, so that these are correctly understood and explained. When it is claimed, for example, that one can barely go beyond satiation, then that corresponds to a wrong opinion, because beyond satiation, gluttony is also still possible. Therefore, there exists a great difference between whether someone is satiated or has stuffed himself or herself full through feasting. Hungry or satiated, satisfied or unsatisfied, sexually satisfied or unsatisfied, these are different states which can also correspondingly trigger unconscious cognitive perceptions and negative thoughts and feelings, or even emotions. Therefore, in each case, the particular unconscious state very strongly determines the emergence and the kind and wise as well as the intensity of the feelings which are called forth and formed through conscious or unconscious thoughts, and which then influence the psyche and form its state negatively or positively. Drugs of every kind, therefore also psychotropic drugs, thus many kinds of medications and alcohol, are likewise able to trigger unconscious perceptions, unconscious thinking, and unconscious recognition. Therefore, unconscious cognition is actually present with that, even when it is not recognizable from outside for the human being concerned and for third parties. And unconscious subliminal perceptions are absolutely present with every human being. Consequently, there is thus nobody in whom unconscious cognitions would not be inherent, and indeed in a form which is body-internal as well as body-external. That therefore means that subliminal cognitions can be conditioned by the environment just as much as they can be endogenous, and therefore body internal. So, for example, threatening faces and situations are able to call forth very strong emotional reactions or thought, feeling-based reactions without the human being consciously perceiving it, consciously thinking about it, and consciously recognizing it, whereby the affected human being also cannot explain why he or she had the corresponding kind of reaction. The most varied personality traits can also be decisive for unconscious cognitions, such as lack of interest in might, affectations of might, as well as many other fixed and reflexively operating behavioral structures and processing procedures which are not consciously perceived, thought about, and recognized, rather only unconsciously, and are therefore no longer in any wise integrated into a volitional, clear, and conscious control. The result of that is that especially pronounced unconscious cogitators, for example, neurotics and such persons, have especially and increasingly negative feelings and, under certain circumstances, also the same kind of emotions, which are called forth entirely through unconscious perceptions, as well as through an unconscious thinking and recognizing. If a human being possesses some abilities, then he or she can consciously use them, from which a psychical and consciousness-based well-being can grow for him or her. But, on the other hand, euphoria is eventually also able to arise from that, depending on how the human being steers his or her thoughts in a conscious or unconscious respect and wise. All that which contains mental values or unvalues is steered and created through the might of the conscious and unconscious thoughts. And unconscious cognitions are often to blame when a human being falls prey to psychical afflictions. For example, when any incapacity of a human being creates in him or her fears of failure and feelings of worthlessness, and so forth. Therefore, all conditions cited here, along with which many more exist, trigger unconscious processes of perception as well as unconscious thoughts and an unconscious recognition, whereby in turn unconscious feelings are called forth, through which the psyche is influenced and its state is correspondingly formed. And depending on the emerging phenomena, and according to the particular consciously or unconsciously perceiving, observing, thinking, and recognizing individual, the cognitive processing plays an extraordinarily and extremely significant role. Therefore, the conscious or unconscious perception of endogenous or body external reactions and situations, and so forth, in any case brings into operation the conscious or unconscious thinking and recognizing, whereby the conscious or unconscious feelings are created and the decisive conscious or unconscious life of the psyche is set in motion. Therefore, in any case, feelings are arranged on cognitive verbal levels in either conscious or unconscious form. And feelings, thereby, in no wise have anything to do with the process of the emergence of emotions, because emotions are completely independent of thoughts and feelings, and rather appear as uncontrollable, lightning-fast reactions to some sorts of factors caused by the body or environment. But that does not mean that emotions could not be combated and resolved, because this possibility in fact exists when the emotions are recognized as such and are dismantled in order to then consciously, volitionally neutralize them, that is to say, dissolve them and eliminate them. In contrast to the emotions, which are not dependent on thoughts, rather solely on some sort of endogenous or environmentally caused reactions, and so forth, feelings arise solely through the thought processes which precede them, and namely in conscious or unconscious form. Consequently, naturally, also conscious or unconscious feelings can arise, which then correspondingly form the psyche according to their negative or positive nature. The perception of endogenous or environmental circumstances, reactions, and other factors often first sets the conscious thinking in motion, and, with it, also the conscious living of feelings. This is also the case with emotions, which are only recognized and begin to trigger thought processes as well as feeling processes when they are perceived. In this sense, it is correct that the human being first becomes conscious of his or her emotions or his or her thoughts and the feelings arising from them, and consciously recognizes the significance of the present current life situation with the help of the significance of an endogenous or environmental stimulus. But this entire process can also proceed and come about in absolutely unconscious form. Consequently, an announcement to the brain results in any case. This constitutes a reactivity which is necessary, because without this, no thinking and no feelings, and thereby also no influencing and forming of the psyche, could occur. Furthermore, emotions, thoughts, and feelings are extremely dependent on the endogenous nervous system, because if it is ill, destructive powers can also very quickly arise in the world of emotions, the world of thoughts, and the world of feelings. This can also be the case with paraplegia, among other things, whereby with this illness there is a destruction between the individual realms of the body, of the nerve connections, which are integrated into the autonomic properties, for which reason, for example, blood vessels, facial expressions, and muscles and so forth are also afflicted. And since the world of emotions and the world of feelings can also be impaired, it is not surprising that there are very often connections between the extent of the destruction and the emotional, as well as feeling-based, world of experience. If, in fact, the nerve connections to the important body regions are actually severed, then the inevitable result occurs in that absolutely no emotions and feeling reactions, or only weak and flat emotions and feeling reactions, can arise. Indeed, in regard to the feelings, it is especially because the corresponding thoughts have likewise become flat. The facial expressions, as the expression of emotions or feelings, are thereby of the greatest significance, whereby, however, the heart frequency, that is to say the pulse, and the skin temperature as well as muscle tension are also significant. Then, as a rule, also bound with that are unconscious thought processes, through which the feelings are unconsciously steered and are kept strong or weak. And naturally also, emotions can manifest in the same way, however, without the influence of the thoughts. What is important in all of it is solely the perception of the specific factors by the brain. That means that a certain physiological (bodily) or environmentally determined state triggers an announcement in the brain, as a result of which an emotion or a thought comes into being. And once thoughts come into being, then feelings also automatically form, namely in a conscious or unconscious form. Especially the individual thoughts, as well as the learned physical reactions to the endogenous or environmentally caused pattern of stimulation, are of enormous significance for the particular situational emergence of the feelings, as well as for their kind and intensity. This is so in any case, regardless of whether the process plays out consciously or unconsciously. In any case, Positive thoughts are required for the positive forming of the feelings, whereby it fundamentally does not matter whether these positive thoughts are consciously or unconsciously nurtured. Of sole importance is the positive product of the thoughts, that is to say, the neutral positive equalized product of the thoughts, because in any case, the might of the thoughts comes to the fore and takes effect. How much the negative or positive therefore takes effect in regard to the feelings and the forming of the psyche depends solely on the kind and the might of the thoughts. If these are negative, in conscious or unconscious form, then corresponding feelings also form from them, as does the state of the psyche, which ultimately falls prey to a depressive form. Human beings who have fallen prey to such depressions then suffer from feeling-based poverty of expression and feeling-based poverty of experience, which is naturally also registered by the central nervous system. The result of this flattened physiological form of reaction is, in turn, then enough that it is consciously or unconsciously perceived by the brain, that is to say, by the consciousness, and is, as a further negative consequence, mentally processed consciously or unconsciously to create from that further conscious or unconscious feelings, through which the psyche is negatively further influenced, whereby the poverty of expression and poverty of experience are increased. That logically produces a vicious cycle of the flattening of feelings, which progresses steadily if it is not resolved with the necessary and suitable means. The method for the remediation of the disturbance is certainly not simple, because it is divided into various values, whereby the most important factor is the conscious, neutral, positive, equalized thinking, because the might of the thoughts determines whether a will for healing and for the remediation of the psychical disturbance is created or not. That is first and foremost. Then, in the second position comes the actual neutral, positive, equalized thinking, which is directed at recognizing and resolving the actual facts of the terrible things. But it is not done with that alone, because since ancient times, that which has been effective has proven as a rule that other processes must also be used. For example, an active training of the feeling-based bodily expression, as well as the feeling-based self-perception, whereby, however, also the self-cognition and the recognition of the actual circumstances of every kind play an extraordinarily important role. Also, psychotherapeutic methods are required in the form of building up one's level of activity and social interaction, and so forth. Now, to begin with, the volitional creation of neutral, positive, equalized thoughts is by no means a simple matter, because, as a rule, firstly, the necessary basis for that is lacking. Consequently, it is initially practically impossible to create positive thoughts out of nothing. As a matter of fact, psychical illnesses are such fundamental processes and patterns of reaction practiced over years that at first no deliberate positive thought can be grasped from them and put into practice, and therefore no positive thinking can bring a resounding success. In truth, positive thinking must first be laboriously learned. Indeed, just as volitionally as when positive thinking is consciously used. Therefore, it is in no way enough to think that one must think positively, and it is just as insufficient to say to a psychically ill human being that he or she must just think positively. With self-therapy, in the sense of the positive thinking, conscious thinking must first be learnt, which takes an enormous amount of time, and is connected with further self-therapy, such as the practice of self-cognition, the recognition of self-worth, and the building up of one's level of activity, and so forth. Also, in regard to third parties who are suffering, it is not sufficient to simply say to them that they must think positively, because, at least initially, they are not in a position to do that, because all prerequisites for that are lacking. And secondly, they are not able to generate a positive thinking because they do not know how. Therefore, everything in this regard is, in any case, connected with a great amount of verbal work, because everything must be precisely explained so that it is understood and can be applied. But also at the same time, the necessary therapies must then be practiced and applied when the particular case requires this. Only in milder cases can one actually directly start with a neutral, positive, equalized thinking if the necessary basis for that is indeed present and no special psychotherapeutic methods are required. Depressions are based on acquired, flattened feelings, which unambiguously and without any doubt are determined by a conscious or unconscious negative thinking. If negative thinking occurs and stabilizes or deepens, then it is unavoidable, and there is no chance that a positive thinking can still come about if the necessary steps are not undertaken through a suitable self-therapy or by means of a psychotherapist. Positive thoughts must be learnt, and indeed by every human being, because they are not simply given to anyone. As a matter of fact, thinking is closely connected with the education which influences one from outside, as well as with one's self-education, because through these effects, negative and positive views and opinions arise, as do forms of thought, and so forth. Self-education is thereby quite especially important because the principal factor of the personality is also based in it, and with that, the principal factor of the consciousness with which the thoughts and their form are ultimately formed, which can then be, quote, warm or, quote, cold, and therefore full of feelings or unfeeling. However, regardless of whether thoughts are, quote, warm and therefore maintained with feelings, or, quote, cold and thereby maintained without feelings, both forms are susceptible and can trigger psychical disturbance. However, quote, warm and therefore feeling-laden thoughts can be much greater triggers of psychical disturbance than thoughts which are unfeeling. Strong thoughts which are imprinted with feelings have, for the human beings who live with them, a profound and existential significance, because such structures of thought are not seldom extremely stubborn, and can only be influenced with great difficulty. Thoughts which are full of feelings are not so easily volitionally dispelled by other thoughts. Consequently, an intentional learning process is needed for that, which consists of a neutral, positive, equalized thinking. This learning is not easy, and to serve the purpose must often be carried out along with other psychotherapeutic methods, such as therapies, for example. Rational consideration alone is not always helpful, as is the case, for example, with human beings with panic disorders. With them, unconscious thoughts and feelings generate unconscious or conscious psychical or physical reactions, which incessantly generate conscious, extreme feeling states of anxiety and panic, which naturally, prior to that, are connected with corresponding thoughts. Such human beings can be repeatedly, clearly shown and reassured that they have no kind of physical illness, and that danger in no wise exists for them, about which they would have to be anxious or fall prey to panic. But all that is useless, even when they know this fact, and everything in all clarity. In the given moment, they again fall prey to their anxiety and panic. Only the learning of a neutral, positive, equalized thinking, and its use, as well as the necessary psychotherapeutic therapies, are able to help.